I am Natalie, 27 years old, and for most of my life, I was just an ordinary kindergarten teacher living paycheck to paycheck in a small one-bedroom apartment. My life was simple, maybe even unremarkable to anyone looking from the outside. I loved my students, my classroom, and the small joys of everyday life, reading secondhand books, hiking in the park, helping at the animal shelter. But I also carried a quiet emptiness, one carved by parents who were physically present yet emotionally absent, who treated me less like a daughter and more like a footnote in their larger ambitions. My grandparents, Elizabeth and Harold, were the ones who truly raised me. They were wealthy, though they never flaunted it, never let money dictate who they were. To the world, they looked ordinary: grandpa in his old pickup truck, grandma with her coupon clippings and modest clothes. But behind that simplicity was strength, wisdom, and a fortune quietly built from decades of sweat and sacrifice. They founded Alexander Logistics with nothing but a dream and a single truck. By the time I was born, it was a multi-million-dollar company with warehouses, fleets, and hundreds of employees. And yet they never lived for luxury. They lived for integrity. They taught me that money is only a tool, never a measure of worth. Grandpa showed me how to grow tomatoes and zucchini in the backyard garden. Grandma baked cookies with me and patiently taught me to sew a button on my torn school blouse. They came to every school play, every soccer game, every milestone my parents missed. With them, I never felt like an afterthought. I felt seen. My father, Richard, hated that about them. He grew up entitled, convinced he deserved everything they built, furious that they wouldn't hand it all over simply because he was their son. He wanted the big house, the endless money, the senior position at their company without lifting a finger. When they refused, insisting he earn it like everyone else, he stormed out and built his life in corporate America instead. To him, their modesty was stinginess, their principles weakness. Our relationship, mine and his, was always defined by that resentment. Still, I never imagined how ugly things could become. 6 weeks ago, everything changed. My grandparents were killed in a car accident, hit head-on by a drunk driver. They died instantly, the police said. I remember sitting in my apartment, my red pen still in hand from grading papers when the call came. My world collapsed in that moment. The two people who loved me unconditionally, who gave me roots and wings, were gone. The funeral was a blur of faces I barely recognized, relatives who hadn't visited in years, suddenly weeping loudly, snapping pictures or standing awkwardly in corners. My parents, of course, took charge, more concerned with appearances than grief. My brother Jason barely looked up from his phone. Aunt Pam, dramatic as always, cried when the cameras were out, but stopped the second attention shifted away. None of them had truly been there for Elizabeth and Harold. I sat numb, unable to process the void opening inside me. 2 weeks later came the reading of the will. I thought it would be a formality. I thought in my naivety that maybe, just maybe, it would be one of those rare moments when family came together instead of tearing apart. I was wrong. We gathered in the law office of Matthew Goldstein, my grandparents' attorney and longtime friend. The tension was thick even before the reading began. My father sat at the end of the oak table, already claiming authority. With his posture, my mother beside him. Jason sprawled carelessly. Aunt Pam, buzzing with restless energy. Uncle Steve, quiet in her shadow. I sat near Matthew, small and outnumbered, bracing myself. When Matthew began, his voice steady and deliberate, I never expected the words that followed. We hereby bequeath our entire estate, totaling approximately $26 million, to our beloved granddaughter, Natalie Grace Foster. Silence. The kind of silence that feels like a storm before the lightning strikes. I couldn't breathe. I thought I misheard. Me, a kindergarten teacher with nothing but student loans, thrifted furniture, and secondhand clothes. $26 million, and then chaos. My father leapt to his feet, snatching the will from Matthew's hands, shouting that it was ridiculous, that I was unfit to manage such wealth. My mother sneered, insisting the money belonged to the family and accusing me of manipulation. Jason pounded the table, whining about startup capital for his next failed venture. Aunt Pam's face flushed with fury as she demanded to know how I had tricked them. Their voices blurred together, venom spilling from mouths that had once kissed my cheeks, read me bedtime stories, pretended to be family. I sat frozen, guilt and shock twisting inside me. Why me? Why only me? Then Matthew pressed play on a video message my grandparents had recorded. Their familiar faces filled the screen, their voices steady, loving, but firm. They explained it all, their disappointment in their children's greed, their heartbreak over years of manipulation, their decision to leave everything to me, the one person who had consistently shown them love without expectation. They said I lived their values. They said I would honor their legacy. Tears blurred my vision as I watched them alive again for those brief moments speaking their truth. But the effect on the others was rage. My father swore he would contest the will my mother demanded I share. Jason mocked me. Aunt Pam hurled accusations. They circled me like predators, and that night the true nightmare began. I left the lawyer's office that day with the weight of the world pressing down on me. In my lap sat a thick envelope Matthew had handed me. Documents, keys, instructions, all symbols of a legacy I hadn't asked for and barely understood. My parents and relatives stormed out in their luxury cars, their faces twisted in rage while I sat in my 10-year-old sedan, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands. I should have felt blessed, chosen, honored. Instead, I felt cursed. By evening, my father called, his voice cold and commanding. "Be at our house by 6. We're going to sort this out as a family." It wasn't an invitation. It was a demand. Against my better judgment, I went. Some small part of me still hoped for a rational conversation, some fragile belief that love could outweigh greed. I was wrong. Their house was a palace of glass and granite, everything designed to impress, nothing designed to comfort. When I entered the living room, they were all waiting, my father by the fireplace with a glass of scotch. My mother perched stiffly on the sofa. Jason sprawled like he owned the place, Aunt Pam pacing, Uncle Steve silent in the corner. The atmosphere was electric, heavy with expectation. My father wasted no time. "You will sign everything over to me. As head of the family, I'll manage the estate. You'll get 10% more than enough for your modest needs." His tone made modest sound like an insult. Jason immediately chimed in. "Yeah, that's fair. She's just a teacher. What's she going to do with all that money? I need at least $5 million to launch my crypto platform." I stared at them, disbelief mixing with anger. They had already divided everything in their minds, the money, the houses, the company. As if my grandparents' wishes didn't matter, as if I were just a roadblock in their path. Aunt Pam waved her phone in the air, babbling about which walls she'd knocked down once she moved into my grandparents' house. My mother, eyes glistening with fake tears, whispered about family loyalty, about how much they had sacrificed for me, as though love could be measured in dollar signs. When guilt didn't work, they turned to threats. My father's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "If you don't sign, we will contest the will. We'll drag your name through court. We'll paint you as manipulative, ungrateful. We'll destroy you, Natalie." Jason smirked from the sofa. "Better to give us what we want now. You'll lose anyway." Something inside me hardened then. I remembered Grandpa's words from years ago, spoken during a schoolyard fight when I was just a child. "No one can take your dignity unless you give it away. Stand firm, Natalie. Know what's right and hold on to it." I picked up the papers they shoved toward me. Broad, manipulative documents that would have stripped me of everything my grandparents entrusted me with. And I said one word. A word I had been too afraid to say to them my entire life. "No." The room went deathly silent. My father's face turned crimson. "What did you just say?" I said, "No, I will not sign. My grandparents trusted me. I will honor them. This isn't about money, it's about their legacy, and I won't betray them." That's when the mask came off completely. My father slammed his glass so hard it cracked in his hand. My mother hissed about ingratitude. Jason called me names I refused to repeat. Aunt Pam wailed about her children's future, but I sat still, my no forming a shield around me. Finally, my father leaned close, his voice like poison. "You have a choice, sign that paper and remain part of this family, or keep your inheritance and be disowned. You cannot have both." I looked around the room, searching desperately for a flicker of compassion, a hint of love in their eyes. There was none. Just greed, just entitlement, just hunger for something that wasn't theirs. And in that moment, I understood the truth. I had never really been family to them. I was only ever a potential resource, a pawn in their endless game of control. So I stood. Then I guess I choose my grandparents' legacy. If disowning me is the price, so be it. My father's laugh was cruel, almost triumphant. Do you even realize what you've done? That apartment you live in? We own that building through one of our companies. Consider your lease terminated. You're homeless, Natalie. You have 30 minutes to pack your essentials. Whatever's left goes to the trash. My stomach dropped. They had trapped me again, using the one piece of leverage I hadn't even known about. My mother checked her diamond-studded watch. Better hurry. The locks will be changed in the morning. Jason smirked. Don't worry, sis. You've got millions now, but good luck finding a bed tonight. 30 minutes. That's all they gave me to dismantle my life. I packed on autopilot, tears burning but unshed. Clothes, toiletries, documents, and one priceless thing, the quilt my grandmother had sewn for me by hand. Everything else, my books, my trophies, my memories, would be lost. And then just when I thought the cruelty had peaked, my father dropped the final blow. Standing in the doorway of my childhood room, his arms crossed like a prison guard, he said casually, "You were never really wanted, Natalie. Your mother and I were ready to divorce before she got pregnant with you. You were the obligation that kept us together. A poor investment, if you ask me." His words sliced deeper than any legal threat could. I had suspected it my whole life, but hearing it confirmed destroyed something fragile inside me. My mother appeared beside him, her tone dripping with disdain. "We've wasted enough money on you, your schooling, your braces, those dance lessons you were terrible at. Consider this the end of our investment." I zipped my last bag, refusing to let them see me cry. I would not give them the satisfaction. As I walked out, Jason leaned against the wall, smirking. "You'll regret this when you have nothing and no one. That money will run out, and then you'll crawl back. And we'll remember how you chose cash over family." At the front door, my mother spat her final venom. "Family is forever, Natalie. You'll realize what you've thrown away." I turned back, my voice low but steady. "I'm not the one throwing away family. You are." The door slammed behind me, the sound echoing like a coffin lid sealing shut. I sat in my car outside their house, my bags piled in the back seat, shaking so badly I could hardly turn the key in the ignition. Their words ricocheted in my head. "You were never really wanted. A poor investment. Crawl back when the money runs out." I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, trying to breathe, trying not to let their poison become truth. My grandparents had believed in me. They had loved me. That had to mean something. I drove aimlessly that night, past the glowing skyline, past the neighborhoods where families sat down to dinner in warm kitchens. Every light in a window reminded me of what I had lost, what I had never really had with my parents. Finally, with nowhere else to go, I pulled into a motel off the highway. The room smelled of bleach and loneliness. I lay on the stiff mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, clutching my grandmother's quilt, and I wept until my chest hurt. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages, dozens of them. My father, my mother Jason, Aunt Pam. Some were threats. "You'll regret this. We'll see you in court." Some were manipulations. "You're tearing this family apart. Just share Natalie. That's what your grandparents would want." And some were dripping with venom. "Ungrateful brat. You never deserved them or their money." I blocked every number. I wanted to disappear, but Matthew the lawyer wouldn't let me. "Natalie," he said when I came to his office, his voice steady and kind, "your grandparents knew this would happen. That's why they prepared everything so carefully. Their assets are protected in trusts. Their company shares are locked. Your parents can try to contest, but the chances are slim." I shook my head. "They'll still find a way to destroy me." He leaned forward. "They can only destroy you if you let them. This inheritance isn't a curse, it's a shield. Use it." Those words became my anchor. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild. I found a temporary apartment in a quiet neighborhood, small but mine. I kept teaching at the kindergarten because the thought of leaving my students shattered me. I didn't want to become the kind of person who thought money made them better than others. But at night, I researched. I studied every file Matthew gave me, every account, every property. The numbers felt unreal. $26 million, companies, investments, assets, scattered across states. It was overwhelming, but it was also empowering. Then one night, while digging through old boxes my grandparents had left in storage, I found something that changed everything: letters. Dozens of them tied with string written in my grandmother's neat script. They were addressed to me but dated years before my birth. The earliest one read, "For the granddaughter we pray for someday." My throat tightened as I read their words, filled with hope, love, and dreams for the child they hadn't even met yet. But among the letters was something darker. A sealed envelope marked, "For Natalie's eyes only when she is ready." Inside was a confession that sent shivers down my spine. My grandparents revealed that years ago my father had tried to steal from the company millions siphoned into secret accounts. They discovered it, confronted him, and instead of pressing charges, they had covered it up for the sake of family reputation. Their forgiveness had conditions: he was cut off from ever inheriting the business. He never forgave them for that. The puzzle pieces clicked together. His bitterness, his hatred of me, his obsession with the inheritance. It wasn't just about money, it was about revenge. He saw me as the final insult, the living proof of his failure, the granddaughter trusted with everything he thought should have been his. I sat in that storage unit, the letters spread around me like a map of love and betrayal. And I understood something crucial: this wasn't just my fight. It was my grandparents' unfinished battle, their legacy placed in my hands. Days later, the threats escalated. A letter arrived from my father's attorney, official papers, contesting the will, accusing me of undue influence, claiming I had manipulated my grandparents in their final years. The lies were staggering. Jason posted cryptic things on social media about gold digger sisters and family traitors, fueling gossip and speculation. Aunt Pam called me, screaming that her children would be on the streets because of me. But instead of crumbling, I fought. With Matthew by my side, I filed every counter-argument, every piece of evidence, every letter and video my grandparents had left. Their voices, recorded with foresight, cut through every accusation. Their love was undeniable, their reasoning airtight. The courtroom became a theater of betrayal. My father raged, my mother wept, crocodile tears. Jason sneered. Aunt Pam played the martyr. But when the judge ruled in my favor, upholding the will entirely, I felt no triumph, only a hollow ache. I had won, but at what cost? Walking out of the courthouse, reporters flashing cameras, microphones shoved in my face, I wanted to scream the truth. Money doesn't heal wounds. It doesn't buy love. It doesn't give back the family I lost. And yet deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Because one thing my father had said still haunted me. "You were never really wanted." Those words gnawed at me day and night. You were never really wanted. I replayed them like a cruel melody I couldn't escape. Even with millions sitting in bank accounts under my name, even with lawyers confirming the estate was mine, I felt small, worthless. Like that unwanted child again, standing in the hallway while my parents argued, clutching a doll to drown out the sound of slammed doors. But something inside me was shifting too. My grandparents had trusted me with their entire legacy, and I couldn't let their love be drowned out by my parents' hatred. I needed to reclaim my story, not as their unwanted daughter, but as Elizabeth and Harold's granddaughter, the one they had believed in. So I began to live differently. Not extravagantly, no luxury cars, no diamond watches, but intentionally. I paid off my student loans and then quietly donated to my old elementary school, funding new books and a playground. I created scholarships for kids who wanted to study education, honoring the profession I loved. I didn't tell my parents or Jason or Aunt Pam. This wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving my grandparents right. Still, their shadow lingered. My father wouldn't stop. Late-night emails, unsigned but clearly from him, hissed with threats. "Money won't protect you. We'll drag you down." Anonymous envelopes appeared under my apartment door with photos of me walking home, proof I was being watched. Once my car tires were slashed outside the hospital where I worked. The police could never prove anything, but I knew. They wanted to scare me into surrender. Then came the twist I never saw coming. One evening, while sorting through more of my grandparents' files, I discovered hidden financial records, offshore accounts, transfers, shell companies tied not to my grandparents, but to my father. The same pattern my grandparents had described in their secret letter. He hadn't stopped stealing all those years ago. He had continued siphoning funds from other businesses, laundering money through networks I couldn't even fully trace. It hit me like lightning. My father wasn't just greedy, he was criminal. And if I let fear silence me, I would be complicit in protecting him. My grandparents had covered for him once, but I wouldn't. Not now. Not when I had the means and the evidence. I gathered everything's copies, statements, files, and brought them to Matthew. His face darkened as he flipped through the documents. Natalie, if this is what I think it is, your father could face federal charges. Are you sure you want to go down this road? It will tear your family apart even more. Tears burned my eyes. What family? They tore it apart long before me. This isn't revenge, Matthew. This is justice. The investigation began quietly, but it didn't stay quiet for long. Within weeks, federal agents were circling. Subpoenas went out. My father's pristine image as a high-ranking executive began to crumble under scrutiny. My mother's frantic messages filled my voicemail, begging me to fix this, insisting I was destroying us all. Jason ranted online about betrayal. Aunt Pam screamed that her life was over, but I stayed silent. For once, I didn't explain myself. I didn't beg them to understand. I let the truth speak louder than I ever could. The day they came to arrest my father was surreal. News cameras swarmed his house as he was led out in handcuffs, his face pale with fury. My mother clung to him, shrieking about conspiracies. Jason hid behind tinted windows, refusing to face reporters. And me, I sat in my apartment, clutching my grandmother's quilt, watching it unfold on TV with tears streaming down my face. Not tears of triumph, tears of grief, because no matter how much he had hurt me, he was still my father, and I had delivered the final blow. In the days that followed, the media painted me as the dutiful granddaughter, the whistleblower, the unexpected heiress who stood against corruption. But behind the headlines, I was just a broken woman trying to piece together a life out of ashes. At night, I still heard his voice in my head. You were never really wanted. And maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't wanted by them. But as I lay in bed surrounded by letters my grandparents had written just for me, I realized something more important. I was wanted by the people who mattered. I was loved by the ones whose love was real. And that love had carried me here to this moment, where I had chosen truth over silence, legacy over fear. Yet I knew the storm wasn't over. Trials were coming, secrets still buried might rise, and I had no idea whether I would survive the weight of what I'd unleashed. The trial began in the spring, and with it came a whirlwind I could never have prepared for. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, splashing my family's name across every headline. My father, once polished and commanding, sat hunched in a suit that suddenly looked too large for him, his eyes sunken, his jaw tight with rage. My mother never left his side, her face painted with denial, whispering frantically to him as if her words could undo reality. Jason refused to testify, but his absence spoke louder than his presence ever could. When I took the stand, I thought my voice would crack, but it didn't. I told the truth, the whole truth. About the manipulation, the threats, the lies. About the secret accounts, the theft, the betrayal my grandparents had warned me of. Every word felt like peeling open old wounds, but I reminded myself this wasn't for revenge. This was for justice. For the legacy of the two people who had loved me when no one else did. The courtroom was silent when the evidence was displayed on the screen's bank transfers, shell companies' names and dates my father thought were buried forever. I glanced at him once, and in his eyes I saw something I had never seen before. Not anger, not superiority, but fear. For the first time, he looked small. The verdict came weeks later. Guilty. Multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. My father was sentenced to years in federal prison. The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder in my chest. My mother wailed, clutching her pearls, but no one could comfort her. Jason slipped out the back, unable to face the disgrace. Aunt Pam vanished from the public eye, her endless complaints silenced by shame. I walked out of that courthouse into the crisp spring air, the sun breaking through the clouds, and for the first time in years I felt free. Not from the burden of inheritance or the weight of betrayal, but from the lie I had carried since childhood that I was unwanted. Because standing there, I realized something being wanted by them had never mattered. My worth was never theirs to define. My grandparents had seen me for who I was, had loved me wholly, had entrusted me with everything they built. And I had honored them even when it broke me. Life after the trial wasn't glamorous. I still taught at the kindergarten, still woke up at dawn to make lesson plans, still spent weekends helping my students with art projects. But I also began to dream bigger. I expanded the scholarships. I funded community centers. I even bought a house with a garden planting tomatoes and zucchini, just like Grandpa had taught me, the soil rich with memory. Some nights I sat on the porch, quilt around my shoulders, letters spread across my lap. I would read my grandmother's words aloud, letting them fill the quiet. For the granddaughter we pray for someday. Those prayers had carried me here. And though my parents had tried to convince me otherwise, I knew now I had always been wanted. I had always been enough. Do I miss them? In a strange, aching way, yes. I miss the idea of family more than the reality of it. I grieve what could have been, what should have been. But I don't grieve the loss of people who chose greed over love. That grief I buried long ago. If you've listened to my story this far, maybe it's because you too know what it feels like to be unwanted, to be betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you. If that's you, please hear me. Your worth is not defined by their blindness. You are not what they failed to see. You are more. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If my story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more real stories of pain, truth, and resilience. And most of all, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Tell me your story, your struggle, your strength. Because none of us are as alone as we think.